What's up, YouTube? Capital G here, checking out the brand new Fiendsmith archetype that just got revealed coming out of the Infinite Forbidden, which should be dropping in the TCG around mid-July, so it actually won't be that long of a wait until you can play these cards. Fiendsmith is interesting, and I'm definitely digging this archetype. Aesthetically, it looks absolutely amazing. A lot of people have noted that it looks like maybe Konami drew inspiration from Devil May Cry, because the main guy in this archetype, the Fiendsmith himself, definitely reminiscent of Dante. And then from a competitive standpoint, or like a playability factor, I see a lot of potential here. I mean, you got some crazy one-card combos with the Fiendsmith, and it seems like maybe you're not going to be able to play it pure right now, but you can definitely mix it in with other light fiend themes. Like, well, right now there's really just Musketeers and Fables, but I think that there's a lot of potential here because the main guy of the archetype is kind of like a one-card starter and like a combo enabler, and it seems like it could be used definitely as like a splashable engine. But anyways, I'll cover the main cards, the most important ones, and then obviously I'll work around, and I won't read it verbatim. I'll just kind of summarize what the card does just for the sake of time. The main guy is the Fiendsmith. You can think of him as Dante from Devil May Cry, and even though he's a high level monster, level 6, it's perfectly fine because you can special summon him from the graveyard with his third effect. Then his first effect is just pure utility. You discard him from your hand, and then he can rota for any of the spells and traps in the archetype, which is already pretty crazy. The second effect works with the link monsters in this archetype, where you target a Fiendsmith equip card and then a monster on the field, so probably one of your opponent's monsters, and then you just send those two cards to the graveyard. So he does have built-in free removal, which is always going to be excellent. The third effect, again, is the revival effect, which, you get him in the graveyard by discarding him and getting one of the spells. The third effect is, you shuffle another light fiend monster from your graveyard into the extra deck or back into your main deck, and then you summon this card. So obviously, discard him, get him in the graveyard, get another, light fiend in the graveyard, and then you can just monster reborn him for free. The main card that he ties into so well is probably the token producing card, and that would be the Fiendsmith Sanctus, which is a quick play, and honestly you can just think of this as like Sky Striker Hornet drones. It's a hard once per turn on like the effects, but it says if you control no face-up monsters, or all your monsters are light fiends, you get to special summon a Fiendsmith token, and then only fiends can declare an attack for the rest of the turn. Again, if you're going first, that super doesn't matter, but the main thing is like you discard the Fiendsmith, you search this card, then you get a token, and then you just basically like play from there because there is a link one. The second effect is if a Fiendsmith monster or monsters is destroyed by your opponent's card effect while this card's in the graveyard, you just reset it to the field. So, you love any cards that give you free recursion. And this card goes, like the token producing card, goes straight into the link one, and it kind of shows you how this deck is able to like combo by just opening with like the Fiendsmith and nothing else. The link one is, some people have said it's a little reminiscent of Prank Kid's Meow Mew. It's a link one that requires a light fiend monster, so that's why some people have talked about Fabled and Musketeers, because you need other light fiends to like be in your graveyard to use all the effects of Fiendsmith, also getting into the link one. But the first effect is during the main phase, you tribute this card and you summon the Fiendsmith from your deck or from your hand, and then the second effect is you can target a non-link light fiend monster you control, and you equipped it, and then that monster gets 600 attack. So the links equip to your non-link monsters on the field as long as they're light fiends, and that's how you get, not only you get a little bit of a buff where you get 600 attack, but then if it's the regular Fiendsmith, then you can just get like free monster removal where you can get rid of the link and then get rid of one of your opponent's monsters. So one of the simplest combos you can pull off with Fiendsmith, just using the 3 cards that I talked about, is actually a 1-card rank 6 DDD monster, which that card is insane. We saw not that long ago, the Unchained deck winning YCSs by, making that turn 1, and you can do it with just the Fiendsmith. You don't need any other cards. I'll probably have some footage of other Yugi tubers who have already played the deck. I know Lithium's been messing around with like Musketeers and stuff like that. So basically just discard the Fiendsmith, search the Hornet Drones type card, activate the Hornet Drones, get your token, use the token to go for the link 1, then use the link 1, tribute itself, summon a different copy of Fiendsmith from your deck, and then shuffle the link 1 back into your extra deck to summon your original copy of Fiendsmith from the graveyard. And that should be 4 summons, which means your opponent can't nib you, and then you just overlay those into the DDD Xyz monster, and then that's the 5th summon where they can nib you, but who cares, you just negate the nib and then they look silly. So yeah, there's definitely potential here for this to be used as like a splashable engine, because that is just a 1-card rank 6, double negation, and it only requires you to run 2 cards in your deck. Now, the archetype is also fusion based, and the fusions kind of play off the Xyz. The first fusion just requires 2 Light Fiend monsters. Again, this is why people are, looking at potentially playing other archetypes like Musketeers or Fabled in them, so that you have more, monsters to work with just outside of just like the Fiendsmith and like the Link monsters. Anyways, when it's fusion summon, you can target a Light Fiend monster in your graveyard or banishment, add it to your hand, or special summon it. These type of effects generally end up being like crazy. These like boss monsters that are like synchros or fusions that like instantly reborn a card. Think like a Stardust or Excel, Stardust, Dragon, whichever one like the people used to like constantly go into Baron to floor. Those effects generally end up being very good. Second effect just reduces your opponent's monsters by 600, and then the third effect is kind of just like a random burn damage effect where you shuffle a Light Fiend from your graveyard into the deck or extra deck, and you get 1200 damage. But the reason why I think that this effect is good is because it can be a time cheese play, so it has to be sent to the graveyard. But again, 1200 burn damage is kind of good, because if you're able to make this during your first turn in time, then you can just link it off, and then you can use that effect to just win the game. There is a second fusion, and this is the bigger fusion, but this one gives you the negation, which obviously we love in Yu-Gi-Oh! It requires 2 Light Fiends plus the original Fiendsmith, so obviously we're gonna have to use him. The first effect is the negation. It's not like the Omni negation like Baron de Floor style or Borload Savage Dragon. It's more like what I call the Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss negation, where you're negating a card that's like face up on the field. This one can actually do multiple. It negates based on the link rating of cards that are equipped to it. So if you have the link 1 equipped to it, you just get to negate 1 card. If you have the link 2, which we'll talk about in a second, you get to negate multiple cards. The third effect, or the second effect, excuse me, is removal. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can shuffle a Light Fiend monster from your grave back into your deck, and then you get to target a card on the field, and you get to send that card to the graveyard, which again, like all the monsters in this archetype have an effect that's similar to that basically shuffles a Light Fiend back into the main deck or back into the extra deck. So that's why, again, you're probably going to want to splash maybe Musketeers in here, maybe Fabled in here. I think those could both work. So the link 2 is one of the ways that this archetype can fusion summon. The first effect lets you fusion summon a Fiend fusion monster from your extra deck by shuffling the materials from your graveyard back into the deck, which is actually interesting, because like if you were going to make the DDD rank 6 like turn 1, and then that eventually dies, I wonder at some point could you go into like some of the other fusion DDD monsters using like stuff from your graveyard. That's just something I was thinking about. The second effect, because again, the link monsters equip themselves to non-link light fusions. This one gives you targeting immunity from your opponent. Again, the other one, the link 1, gives you 600 attack. We have a spell card that is a Rhoda type card. This is why people are looking at maybe using Fabled. The Rhoda effect lets you add a Light Fiend monster from your deck to your hand, then discard 1 card. Obviously, Fables love being discarded, so this could essentially just like, search any Fabled card, and then you could just discard it, and then, probably like summon it, or, the Fables have just a bunch of different effects. And then the second effect of this card is just polymerization. You banish this card from the graveyard, and then you fusion summon a Fiendsmith fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as material. So there are 2 ways of fusion summoning in this deck, and I mean the fusion is powerful. Omni negation plus potential removal. There is a trap, which I don't know if the trap's actually going to be played. It's a normal trap, hard once per turn on both the effects. You target a level 7 or higher Light Fiend monster you control, so probably like the fusions, and you send all cards on the field to the graveyard except that monster. Again, it's a very powerful trap card, and it is chainable, which I like. It's non-targeting, non-destruction removal, which is generally some of the most powerful types of removal in the game, so very strong. The second effect is the graveyard effect. If your opponent special summons a monster while this card is in the graveyard, you banish it, and then you can send a Fiendsmith monster from your deck or extra deck to the graveyard, because essentially all of these effects work by shuffling like Fiendsmith monsters or Light Fiends back into like your deck or extra deck, so you kind of need to have like a consistent stream of cards going to your graveyard. But it's a very interesting archetype. Right now, I would think that like the only way to run Fiendsmith pure, you need like another supplemental engine. I think that like, you know, maybe something like Adventurer could work because there's no normal summons in this deck, so you'll never have any like confliction with Rite of Aramasir. Or you could probably go the route of like, again, Musketeers. You could play Fabled, throw in other cards like Tour Guide from the Underworld. Some people talked about like Labyrinth because there's fiends in there, although they are dark fiends, you know. In Labyrinth I don't think there's any light monsters, but it definitely seems like an archetype that has a lot of potential. And again, the artwork is absolutely nuts. I would expect probably to get like a second monster, like a second main deck monster would be at the top of my list. But what do you guys think of Fiendsmiths? I'm excited. Again, I'm someone who really likes Magical Musketeers, and anything to help that deck out is definitely going to be good in my book. So whatever you guys think, you leave that in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching as always.